Good evening. I'm Barry Vann, the author of The Forces of Nature, Our Quest to Conquer the Planet. I hope this doesn't come as a surprise to you, but one of the victims of the climate change debate is the environment itself, and, by extension, us. The Earth is not fragile. We, along with plants and animals, are delicate. How did this happen? Well, in 1980, Oliver S. Owen, for example, published one of my all-time favorite textbooks, Conservation of Natural Resources, An Ecological Approach. In it, he predicted that New York City would be underwater by the turn of the century. Others, too, made similar predictions. When those events did not materialize, the argument to change our ways of life seemed less urgent. Along the way, very real environmental problems like air and water pollution, overharvesting groundwater, and droughts in the wheat belt faded from the public's eye. Well, here on The Vantage Point, we're going to revisit three very real environmental tragedies in which people suffered and died. In the first session, we'll take a look at air pollution disasters that claimed hundreds of lives in the United States and Great Britain. I hope you'll join us. Let's talk about deaths in the fog. On October 26, 1948, a Pennsylvania high school football rivalry was about to be rekindled. Cheerleaders and band members from Donora and Monongahela high schools performed before a packed stadium as they awaited their teams to take their respective places on the field. Being located in the Horseshoe Bend along the Monongahela River, and surrounded by hills that rise some 350 feet above the playing field and the town of Donora, frequently occurring high-pressure centers and local landscape features encouraged the retention of pungent smells of emissions belched out from steel mills, zinc smelting plants, and others that served as the sources of income for many families in the area. During the pregame activities, the evening seemed to be no different from others in the past. The smells that enveloped the football field were familiar to players and others in attendance, but because of an unfortunate interaction between human activities and natural forces, this night was different. Unbeknownst to players, coaches, and team supporters, a temperature inversion was forming over the settlement of 12,000 people, mostly working-class folk. After sunset, cool air descended the hills around the steel town. Warmer air was pushed aloft and formed a ceiling, trapping emissions near the ground. We call those temperature inversions. Relatively cool particles emitted from manufacturing plants served as condensation nuclei on which water droplets formed. A multicolored fog settled in over the football field and the surrounding area. By halftime, the game had to be canceled because the players complained of labored breathing. Later on, we found out through reports that there were high levels of sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and hydrocarbons that were measured in the atmosphere, while soot from local smokestacks settled on everything exposed to the foul night air. Like a freshly fallen snow, sidewalks had footprints on them. Many of them were left by people scampering home to escape the ominous fog that had enveloped Donora. The fog stayed over the town for 6 days. During that time, 5,910 residents became ill with symptoms that included nausea, vomiting, severe headaches, nose, eye, and throat irritations, as well as labored breathing and other respiratory constrictions. At 4 a.m. on Thursday morning, Ivan Say, a 70-year-old immigrant from Yugoslavia, became the first to die from respiratory complications. But by the end of Black Saturday, the number of deaths had reached 17. 2 more people died on Sunday, and 1 died later, bringing the death toll to 20. As of 1948, this was the worst air pollution disaster in the United States, but its distinction did not last long. The death toll in Donora paled in comparison to that which happened in New York City in 1953 and again in 1956. On November 12, 1953, a stagnant high-pressure center descended over the nation's largest city. It lingered over the Big Apple for 10 days. Sky-darkening soot, dust, and fly ash accumulated in the air above the city to an average concentration of 3.5 tons per cubic mile. The city also had a measured sulfur dioxide level that was 5 times its normal amount. Airports were shut down due to poor visibility. Ferry trips to the Statue of Liberty were also canceled due to the pervasive and unrelenting smog. Tens of thousands of people experienced burning eyes and uncontrolled bouts of coughing. But those were minor consequences of the unwelcome shroud that cloaked the city. By the time atmospheric conditions improved on November 22nd, some 200 people were dead. An even worse event occurred in New York City in 1956. In just an 18-hour period, at least 1,000 people died from smog-related illnesses. You know, the industrialized United States was not alone in suffering from smog-related deaths. London, a city famous for its fogs, also suffered from the wrath of nature. On December 4th, 1952, an extra dense pea super, that's what they call the fogs over there, settled in over a 700 square mile area of Greater London and stayed in place for 5 days. Visibility was so bad that men carrying lit flares had to be used to lead crawling buses through the city's streets. Theater performances were canceled due to the poor visibility. Thousands of Londoners flooded hospitals with symptoms ranging from labored breathing to cyanosis. By the time the temperature inversion lifted and drier air from the north further dispersed the pollutants, at least 4,000 people had died from heart disease, bronchitis, bronchopneumonia, all of which were attributed to the smog. Those events and empirical data associated with them led to technological innovations, primarily smokestack scrubbers and increased combustion temperatures, to ensure oxidization of particulates, carbons, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur from emissions. Nitrogen dioxide and sulfur are acid precursors, which means that when they are combined with oxygen and water in the atmosphere, they form sulfuric and nitric acids. These acids fall to the earth in rain droplets and snowflakes where they acidify lakes, kill and harm vegetation, and accelerate deterioration of buildings and statues. The spillover costs associated with these deleterious impacts have forced the governments of Canada, the United States, United Kingdom to pass a number of acts to regulate and thus control emissions. Great Britain has went beyond everybody else in terms of shifting from coal to nuclear power generation. City governments have also begun to regulate the burning of household waste because in the Rust Belt in cities like Detroit, even as late as 1968 when I was a wee lad, residents burnt household refuse, including plastics, which released carcinogens in the alleys behind their homes. I was one of them, I have to admit. Nevertheless, these changes in behavior or adaptations were the result of societies interfacing proactively with environmental limits. Today, Donora and the greater Pittsburgh area have remarkably clean air. However, heavy manufacturing has also declined in the region, so it is difficult to assign credit in improved air quality in this part of the Rust Belt to technology or to shifts in global investments in coal-fired steel production. China today has 5 of the top 10 most polluted cities with respect to air pollution. Because environmentally safe technology is expensive and would make their products less competitive in the global market, China and other Asian countries have been slow to enact laws to safeguard their respective environments and populations. Nonetheless, the technology to improve the quality of air in highly industrial places is solid and reliable. So there is hope that China and Asian countries or nations will adopt more efficient ways to produce energy to run production facilities. Well, I hope this brief excursion into some of the West's worst air pollution disasters makes you think about air pollution and what we can do to abate such conditions in the future. In our next session on the Vantage Point, we'll look at the death and rebirth of Lake Erie. I hope you'll join us. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Good night.